Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wolves of Westminster Down the Pub podcast, the podcast where we deliver to you the standard conversations you'd have in the pub when you're bored and start talking about politics. I am Peter Simpson, a contributor to Wolves of Westminster, here once again with Patrick Timms, the editor of Wolves of Westminster. Hello, Patrick.
Hello.
And Simon, another contributor to Wolves of Westminster. Hello, Simon.
Good evening.
Yes, tonight you two are on the beer again, but we're recording on a Wednesday, so I've downgraded myself to the designated driver and having a pint of water. So, because work in the morning, so have to be a bit sensible. But what are you two on this week? I notice you're not on the San Miguel again this time, Simon.
I am on the Żubr, which is a Polish beer made from where I'm from in Podlasie in the Far East. It's effectively it is marketed as the beer of the bison. I don't understand why. Mainly it's because our regional animal is the bison. But there you go. You can also get Żubrówka, which is a special type of vodka made by the same company. Lovely stuff, very nice. So yeah, I'm on the Polish bison beer.
Very nice. And Patrick, what have you poured yourself out tonight?
I'm afraid I'm on the Stella tonight. So, white Peter. Yeah.
Thank God you're single.
Yeah, well, yeah, I need my vest. Oh, I've had a vest since high school. I mean, you kind of, it's kind of thing that your mother makes you wear, and it's a bit weird. And now, I don't have to worry about that kind of thing. So there we are. That's quite enough of that.
Very nice. Well, I suppose the big news, obviously, of this week, at time of recording, obviously, it's Wednesday, so we've just finished the Tory conference. From what I can tell, the conclusion of it was 3 days of everyone at a wake, and then everyone's surprisingly had a bit of a revival on the last day with Kemi's speech. But it might come crashing down soon after that. I don't know.
Well, it might do. I mean, if it does, I mean, it's not going to be this side of Christmas. If anyone's going to remove her, it's going to be after the May elections of next year. With that said, though, yes, I mean, it was what some people might even call a pretty barnstorming speech. You had the headline policy announcement was the abolition of stamp duty. Although when we say the abolition of it, it's not disappearing entirely. It's just disappearing for what is referred to as primary homes. So it's pretty much just your first home, basically. Now, with that said, I actually, this is an interesting question. I don't know whether they've thought it through. So, for example, there's a friend of mine who also happens to be the inheritor and executor of my estate. Now, he bought, when this disease eventually kills me, he bought a house for something like 80,000, I think, something like that. This is years and years ago, and did it up. And let's just say he earns pretty well because he bought that on a mortgage. He's paid it off. Okay, so
Nice.
Well, good for him. And so he now rents it out, so he has that extra bit of rental income to come in for him. But now he has another house that he's already bought. That is this was actually during COVID. He bought that house. Now that's something like $250,000, that one. So he's got that. And I don't know, is that, I mean, it is his primary home, but it is also technically then his second home. Except that the first one isn't his actual home because he's never actually lived in it.
Yeah. I'm not sure on that one. I'm sure we'll get more policy detail. I mean, every time Reform throw out policy, it's, well, where's the detail? You don't have detail. The Tory seems to have got away with that. Having said that, go on.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I find this wording interesting, your primary home. So yes. I would assume that is where you live, and therefore, in the case of my friend, that would not be particularly a consideration. But certainly, it got her a massive, standing ovation at that conference speech. It's a very popular move. And the next question from me, before I shut up for a second, is: Well, the next one would be inheritance tax now, wouldn't it? You want to be even more popular.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, which
Or-
they're certainly taking away from the farmers, given that's the big political issue of certainly last autumn. So, I mean, I was going to add on to that as well. This is kind of in Reform's contract that I looked up, because I'm sure they had something on stamp duty, and they did. Their stamp duty policy was remove it for all houses under 750,000. Anything between that and 1.5 million is 2%. Anything beyond 1.5 million is 4%, which also deals with the whole primary secondary home issue. And to be honest, it's a bit more sensible anyway, because I think it's like top 15 to 20% of houses cost over $750,000. And it's basically only going to affect London homes and high-end homes in cities.
This very much feels like the I want people to be able to buy a house in London tax cut. But it's a case of, do they make it primary residence or do they make it first home? That's the key difference there.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, and that's what's unclear.
Angela Rayner will be happy, I think, either way. But
well, I can't disagree with that. But this is why I say it. Though. This is the point. It's like, what does primary home actually mean? You know, and this is where we need to have things thought through, I think, a bit further.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine it will come out as, it's basically, it's where you live. And like I say, just to raise the case again of my friend, well, he bought it and he did it up precisely to be a sort of buy to rent, as in rent out thing. Has he ever lived there? No. So presumably the house he's now actually bought, where he does live, is in fact his primary home, and I would imagine that's the direction the policy would go in, but we don't know because we haven't been told.
Yeah.
I mean, either way, it's still a very good policy, really, because it's a big problem with the housing market is people don't want to pay the thousands of pounds extra for the stamp duty, especially if they're moving home. On a second home, I think people won't really mind because this is a luxury.
Yeah.
Whereas obviously when it's your first home, people don't want to downsize because of that. I wouldn't be shocked if that's part of the reason my parents have stayed in a 4-bedroom home when there's only 2 of them living there. That plus they can have the whole family over and we can all stay in a room, I suppose. But we all live close. We all live close enough anyway we can get home.
I do generally think that the numbers on that, 125,000 for the first home and then 300,000 for the value of any home and or the second residence. I don't think it's kept up with any kind of inflation. I don't think this has been reassessed in a long time. So, whatever the numbers are, it needs to have a look at. You need to have a look at it anyway.
Yeah, I'd say so. It's the same. You've got fiscal drag on income tax as well, but nobody seems to want to touch that because that's a big moneymaker. In fact, you have Mel Stride when he was asked the hypothetical of you're in Rachel Reeves' situation. What tax do you raise? No chance to cut spending because your party's mad. And he said, well, it's income tax because that's the big money maker. But I'm going to go mad if I have to pay more income tax next year.
Andrew Griffith did go mad. His eyes popped out of his skull. Have you seen the picture?
Yeah, well, he was told that, wasn't he? It's like Mel Stride just said said he'd raise income tax if he was in Reeves' position.
I think Andrew looked like his head was going to explode. It was hilarious.
I don't think he had the context of it's a hypothetical and he was told he can't cut anything, but it was still quite funny to see. But I mean, well, that was in one of the rooms that they kept saying, "Oh, look how full it is. We've got 50 people in these alcoves." Where the main stage, obviously, it's much smaller than previous conferences. Were usually empty, apart from Kenny Badenoch's speeches, which you would expect, obviously, because that certainly in the Vox Pops I heard a lot of people were saying, "God, I've never known it this empty." It's
having been there last year, even the main room for where the speeches were being held, for where the party leader was speaking. From the photos, it did really look bare, actually. And when I went to Reform Conference, I thought, this is a bit ghetto. You've got open air theatres for the fringe events, and then when you went into the actual main hall, it's like, oh my god, I'm in a stadium. It's like a concert. It's amazing.
It's a rally, yeah.
And then like compared to what I even saw at Reform Conference last year, big step up. But now, given so some of my friends went to Tory conference this year, they sent me the pictures. I was like, Jesus, this does look depressing. And in terms of content, it actually I don't think it was that bad at all. I think it was better than last year because you didn't have 4 people play acting as the party leader. But it did look like a downgrade, and it did look very, very depressing.
Well, I imagine they didn't have the sponsoring they will have had last year.
Well, you say so, but they claim they've made more money than any other party this year. Whether that's true,
I think that's through donations alone, rather than necessarily sponsorship.
But that's usually where it comes from.
Is that fair enough?
Absolutely. I mean, political parties can't really make a profit by themselves, so they pretty much rely on donor funding. And I think really the case in point for this one was announcing things that they thought. Well, and you made the point earlier that it is basically a case of making London homes cheaper. Well, who are they targeting then? Well, we know exactly who they're targeting.
Nick 30. It's Nick 30, and occasionally the old people that want to buy a £1.5 million home. But it's mostly the Nick 30 vote they want to get from that.
Which is odd to me because Nick 30 is quite a die-hard Labour voter. For people who don't know what Nick 30 is, it's a meme effectively of a guy working in finance who's done everything right. He's trying to make his way in the world, but he's held back by basically by government and parliamentary decisions that mean he can't afford a home. He pays taxes effectively to 60% if you include VAT and everything else. And all that money either goes to pensioners, foreigners, or illegal migrants that are here, or even migrants that are here through benefits, and obviously natives as well. So you just feel like you're being completely played by the system. But these people voted for all that, and they still do. I know plenty of Nick 30s. I am a Nick 30, and I'm weird for being a reform activist.
Gosh, well, that's the thing, though, isn't it? Because you see Kemi effectively trying to appeal to a demographic that her staffers, rightfully in my view, think is getting absolutely shafted.
Yeah.
But actually, if you look at the sort of policies these people want, is cutting stamp duty going to cut through? And I think the answer is no.
No.
And that's the depressing thing. The commentariat, okay,
we love it.
Of whom we're kind of part of. Let's not take the mickey here. We are kind of part of it. We love it. But average voter, the first question is, what's stamp duty?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have to pay.
I didn't know what it was until I googled it about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
So the average person doesn't know what this is, don't know how it affects them. Many people that are buying a home, especially if you're buying it off your parents' money, that's just extra stuff on the bill that you don't understand, you don't care about. I think that was red meat for a very particular kind of voter and opinion former, and in a very bizarre way, it's worked.
But
I mean, I would say the strategy has been successful. On the points that you mentioned, Simon, there are people really not necessarily knowing how the world actually works. I will, of course, without naming any names, one of my lodgers, she's only, 22, something like that, and Simon's grinning, he knows who I mean. I explained to her I'd had the letter through about the electoral roll, and because legally you are obliged to, as a landlord, you must say who is living there at the time. And I don't blame her for not knowing about that legal obligation as to who is living where and whether in the electoral roll and whether or not you want that to be public. That's another choice that you can make. But she was asking me what it meant, and I said, well, it's for elections, it's for local elections or general elections. I said it's about voting. And she literally said, what's voting? Okay?
Yeah.
So
Labour MP in 20 years, I'll give you that.
So it's one of those where it's like, actually, a lot of people, I find this in particular in the press and in the Westminster political class, just do not understand the fact that most people do not understand how the country works. Now, that is one of the ways in which some people, and again, naming no names, but some people like to pull the wool over people's eyes because they know they don't know how it works.
Yeah.
But with that said, in terms of the policy headlines here, we obviously have the abolish stamp duty thing, which is a bit disingenuous because this is what it says in the email: abolish stamp duty, helping millions to own their own home, move or downsize. Okay, yeah, right, yeah, I know what that means. But they haven't actually abolished stamp duty; they've just abolished much of it, except that they haven't, because they're not in power anyway. But it's not actually abolishing the institution, as it were, of stamp duty itself. It's just removing a lot of people from that bracket, which I'm sure would be very, very welcome. Now, it then goes on to, there are 5 policy points here, well, the 5 bullet points here anyway. You have that. Then you have cut £47 billion of wasteful government spending and use the savings to cut taxes and slash the deficit under our golden economic rule. Now, okay, it
sounds good to me, but I'm weird.
It sounds good to me as well. But what we also have there is there's an adding up formula of we will save this and this and this and this and this, which will add up to saving that. Okay, it's a bold policy statement. That much is worth saying. Then we have leave the ECHR. Now, again, as we said before, I mean, it's not as though that wasn't actually widely anticipated. Yes, of course it was. And no serious credible party, unless you're Labour, is all the
Liberals, yeah.
Well, right, fair enough. But,
right wing credible party, but all the non-credible ones want to leave.
It's well, quite so. But so that was the next major policy announcement. There was then some more stuff. They said they want to double the number of apprenticeships. Now, again, it's worth noting. I mean, that the apprenticeship program that was brought in following the 2010 election through the coalition government. I mean, this was, I will use the word speculative, and I think there are people. I've had apprentices who I've directly line managed who eventually worked out this wasn't really for them because it was too nascent of a program. It wasn't really delivering. They could get a better deal in a different kind of job.
Yeah.
And I mean, they can work, but quite a lot of the time, actually, and I say this from experience, they don't work. This notion of, I'm going to cite someone else who, again, I won't name, a friend of mine, very good friend. I shall see him again over the weekend. Now, he is from East Sussex, and you can tell the sheer extent, because we're all northern lads here, that he had, no, seriously, you can't, the sheer extent to which he had assimilated, because he came up here to the northwest when he was 18. And it didn't take long for the accent to change, because if you asked him where he came from, he'd say East Sussex. And it's like,
so Patrick, before you go on to that, my burning question is, how much does an apprentice cost? Is he expensive? Is he not?
I will answer that later.
Okay.
That means he is.
I will. Because I know I've employed them. Okay. But anyway, so this is the thing with my friend. He's East Sussex. He said, "Well, you don't sound like you come from East Sussex, do you?" So anyway, and when he came up, he was 18, and he had a job with the railways as an apprentice with Railway Heritage, of course, because this is Crewe. It has a great railway heritage, and he was one of the last of that generation who expected when they got an apprenticeship they were going to get a job for life, because that was the way apprenticeships were always sold.
Yeah.
You see, in generations beforehand, that was the way that they were always sold. And now they're more of a gimmick for allowing employers to, I hate to sound like a massive leftist, but exploit labour for a lot less than labour with a small L, than they would otherwise have to pay for it. That's basically the way the scheme's worked out, and it's sad because that wasn't the intention of it. But it does seem to be the way it's worked out. So when the Tory party is now saying, oh, we're going to double apprenticeships, well, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, take your pick. Then the other thing they say is reverse Labour's chaos, protect our borders, and make work pay again, which is just a completely meaningless sentence. I think you can define that by all manner of other ways. Now, Simon, please, let's return to your question.
Yeah, no, right. Well, a couple of things there. First of all, how much does an apprentice cost? Are they expensive? Are they not nowadays? And another thing, I do just want to point out that it is kind of interesting that the Tories, or whatever thing is in charge, usually has the stones to say we want more apprentices, but never even more stones to say, and we want you to retain them, because then it's too much regulation, it's too many rules. So people are very selective about where they want to place rules. So when you get an apprentice, you don't want to say, okay, you can fire these people after X, Y, Z years, but you never ever say, and you have to retain these people. They frame this as cheap labor, not an investment.
I will give you a couple of stories on that one. Okay. When my boss at the high school that I worked at left, and they put me up into his job, which they didn't technically advertise for, which I probably technically should have done. Anyway, that's quite enough of that. I remember.
Sorry for another time.
Well, yes, but I remember the head telling me at the time, yeah, you're going to have to do the job by yourself. To which I think I gave the most professional equivalent that I could as an answer of F off. I'm not doing. You can't do this job by yourself, right? But they said, well, we haven't got the money to hire a full-time technician, right? So I then spoke to one of the assistant heads, and he had the idea of getting an apprentice in. Now, this is before they were necessarily all that sort of, commonplace in the modern era. And so I went back to the head and I said, well, I've had this idea, which was a lie. But someone else has had this idea. But, so we could do this. And we were paying him now. It was quite, and money's changed since then, but it was something like 150 quid a week, something like that. It's not a lot. Also, I had to sign off on all his pay slips, which afforded me a great opportunity to say, now, who am I? You're the most amazing person ever, all this kind of thing. Then I would sign his pay slip. There we are. Hey, it was workplace banter, man. Come on, that was all.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah, if you say so.
So basically, they don't cost much. They can cost you as little as 10. Well, money's changed again. So 10 to 15. In fact, I was looking at job adverts.
I think it will generally be £100 a week. Now. Yeah. I'm confident saying that.
I was looking at a job advert today for an apprentice, £15,000 a year. So and right, so really Jesus. they do not cost much. The reason why all of that took place was because, like I say, we could not afford a technician, but we could afford an apprentice. And with the way that recruitment happens like that, the way that apprenticeships were always carried out, it was sort of like, okay, we're going to give you training and experience and a career and that sort of thing, but we're doing it basically because we can't afford to employ an already experienced professional, you see? Yeah. So when the Tories now say we're going to double apprenticeships, what that means is they're recognizing that companies can't actually afford to employ experienced professionals. With that said, we know why. Yeah. We do know why.
Taxes.
Yes.
Yeah. Cost of living. We do know why. Who put us in that position?
He lived. Yeah. Because he lives.
It's Max Tempers on Twitter talks about this all the time. It's in wage compression as well. In that, why would you bother becoming an apprentice to get 100 quid a week and get skills when you can just work in Tesco?
Can I tell you what my friend is going to be making as the, director at a undisclosed American museum?
No, I don't want you to
Sorry,
tell me.
sorry.
I'll cry.
Assistant director at a regional American museum.
Is it 6 figures?
Yes. It's not quite 6 figures, so it's 4
It's not
figures. Guess
quite.
how much it is?
4 figures? A year?
4 figures, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
4 figures a year?
Well,
like
it's
2,000?
2 numbers and then K. It's 2 numbers then K, so I'm maths illiterate.
So that's 5 figures. Yeah, I was
It's
very
2 numbers then
confused.
K.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I don't know, $70,000.
Well, I'm going to say,
$90,000
Simon,
a year.
it's a good job you're teaching history and not maths.
Yes. He's going to be earning $90,000 a year as the assistant director of a regional museum in America.
I mean, regional director of a museum. That's still like, I suppose that's to some level.
No. But get this. His mum, teaches year 7 maths exclusively.
Right.
110 a year
in America.
Yep.
The thing is with teachers here, a lot of the money gets deferred to pensions, I suppose. But
yeah, you get a decent pension, but most of the money, to my knowledge, gets locked up in the academy trusts, which we can discuss at some other point.
Yeah, but I mean, another reason that they're saying double apprenticeships, nobody's going to know any of the details we've just gone through. It's just going to be like, hey, look, more jobs.
Yeah, a lot of it's soundbite. I mean, I think a lot of it is obviously policy based, right? It's stuff that's based on reality. But when you look into the detail, is this all up to scratch? Never is, but...
Yeah, but to be fair to them, which I'm rarely fair to the Tories, but they are 3.5 years out. So
yeah,
I'll give them that.
Oh, she apparently has said, according to close Kemi insiders, that she will resign if she does not get good polling numbers and/or good council wins in May.
All right, in that case, who do you think is going to replace her?
It's generally Gláeddyv, I think.
I reckon my money would go on Cleverly, to be honest with you. I think.
I don't want to throw myself off a bridge, so I won't say that. But I think a lot of the wets, a lot of what we call the wets, either are now disengaged or have left for more orange pastures, should we say?
Do you reckon?
Yeah, I think a lot of the people that are of the generic type have actually stayed because they're holding out for their hero.
Mr. Gemrick, fair enough to them. I mean, I suppose they've got Katie Lamb as well.
Manjaro.
Yeah.
Of course, he also gave a pretty barnstorming speech at conference as well, doesn't he? From his own capacity.
I didn't actually see that one, but I do know day 3 was pretty much Gemrick Day, which was quite odd considering a lot of people were thinking Gemrick's trying to hold back, but it's like he had a whole day to himself. That's more than
and she was nice to him during his speech as well. So
yeah,
I think it's if I put on my conspiracy brain, what I think this conference has shown, because Genric's been nice-ish to Kemi, and Kemi's been nice-ish to Genrick, I think it validates the idea that there is actually a agreement that if she doesn't get the numbers up by May, if she doesn't get decent May wins, or at least doesn't bleed as hard as people think so,
she's gone. Yeah,
effectively she's gonna be gone if she doesn't get the numbers up. But Genrick won't make a move on November 2nd. Now, my sources, which I won't tell you much about them, but I can show you, are very, very good sources. Used to tell me November 2nd is Genrick Day. Now, not so much. Right. So I think you could get Kemi holding out till May on the basis of how this conference has gone. I'm not going to say that's definite, but it's possible. I mean, I thought it wasn't possible until then.
Yeah, I mean, I've also heard that on all the political coverage I've heard. Effectively, there's a lot of knives out from the new intake of MPs that are trying to effectively regicide. I guess, to get Gemrick in.
In terms of what you're saying there, what I would add is that, I mean, it's the eye before the storm. It's the fact that you are nicest to your opponents when you're about to knife them. And so, in terms of what you were saying about both Kemi and Robert, it's
that could be true. That could all be true.
Yeah.
Oh my! I mean, I'm less wedded to the Tory party than I think either of you. So I'm kind of waiting for a gladiatorial, or the political equivalent of a gladiatorial entertainment
Are you
match.
not entertained? Yeah.
Exactly.
Well,
Whereas,
it's like Gove and Boris, isn't it?
yeah. So I mean that's been the Tory conference really. It's all economics. They want to focus on economics. Don't talk about immigration because reform. But also the Greens have had their conference, which I kept a bit of an eye on, mainly just through a Novara Media interview. Basically, throughout the whole thing, Zach Polanski was very much a I'll take all the worst talking points of the left for the last 10 years and say it through a louder microphone, while Aaron Bastani looks at me like a disappointed father. which I mean, Aaron Bastani's been on a bit of a weird. It's quite clearly he's trying to audience capture people on the right that he thinks he can get with his communist tendencies, because there's this post-liberal movement that kind of died a death about 2 months ago, but people like to pretend still goes on, where they kind of, it's SDP types who all love Clement Attlee, even though I argue he's one of the worst prime ministers we've ever had. And so you got Aaron Bastani trying to say, listen, the right wing, they have a point on immigration, don't they? Then Zach Polanski just replies, no, for 10 minutes. And I can't really tell you beyond what the Greens policy is, other than you already know what it is, because it was a Tory policy for the past 10 years. On a more serious note, yeah, the worst parts of the left, as far, Corbynista politics, economics, and all that put into it. So it's where an awful lot of leftists are going to go, because Corbyn and Sultana have fallen out, and they don't like the fact that they have a load of social conservatives running the party either. So, interesting in left-wing politics. It's all collapsed from the looks of it.
Yeah.
Well, if I can feed in on that one, so they've done what they usually do. As you know, I monitor left-wing politics as well, and I've got 2 emails in my inbox here. One of them is from the Democratic Socialist Network, and now this is quite literally, because you've also got the Socialist Labour Network, and I mean, for God's sake, People's Front of Judea, come on. No, seriously, it is one of those. Now, they are having a meeting, and they will have... what's basically happened is that when the YP, which in political jargon used to mean your problem... but
you got a worse one.
Oh, I did. Well, I bet you do. But is the your party thing. What's basically happened is the your party thing got launched, and on the far left of politics in particular, nobody really noticed, except that now they have, because they've been planning to form a party of their own for a time. Except that, well, basically, so within the SLN, the trend was not towards that, and then another faction emerged within it, and the trend was towards that, and then all the members of the steering committee who voted against it and were voted down systematically resigned. So there was a sort of almost a hostile takeover there. They now are trying to form a new party, but they've spent ages trying to work out how to do it. They've not managed to work out how to do it. So now this other initiative has come along from people who are at least what everyone thinks of them established figures. They're sort of hopping on the bandwagon. The Democratic Socialist Network is another one. They're hopping on the bandwagon. And then you have the CMWP, and they are also hopping on the bandwagon. The CMWP, by the way, if anyone doesn't know, is the Campaign for a Mass Workers' Party. So again, People's Front of Judea. We've got this kind of thing going on all the time.
They can join George Galloway.
Yeah. I can only honestly think of one, 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, if you count Restore Britain as a party, of parties on the right. And then on the left, we've got the Lib Dems, Greens, your party, the 3 or 4 things that you just mentioned, plus the Communist Workers' Party, plus
British Communist Party.
Because they've got their own splinter as well. I mean, it's just insane.
I mean, having said that, we do have 15 alternative right-wing parties, including Reform.
Well, you've got the advanced people as well, haven't you? And
I mean, the ones that have some serious backing. Let's not take.
Well, no, but I mean, but this is
Sure.
the other thing. So I mean, it's always a case of splintering factions, and you get on both the right and the left. So the intel from me at this point is, so you have the Campaign for Mass Workers Party, or has the Democratic Socialist Network. You have the Socialist Labour Network. They are all holding meetings in the course of the next week to cover well, I'm just reading off an email here. We are planning regular monthly meetings covering the development of your party, or whatever becomes its official name. So, there's obviously a bit of an extraction of the urine around that. But so they've all noticed that this initiative, the funny thing is that they didn't for what? For weeks and weeks and weeks, they did not appear to notice this, but now they've noticed it, and they're all trying to leap in on the bandwagon as to how it should be governed and what its policy agenda ought to be. So they're all doing that. We don't know exactly what's going to happen there, but they're all basically going to make their own sort of policy pitches as to what they think ought to be this. But it's interesting that they all kind of feel like they own this, despite the fact that actually none of them do. Quite literally none of them do. It's not their initiative at all. No. So we have all of those different factions on the left. Now this, of course, can be compared to what we have on the right. We have the Conservative Party, at least ostensibly. We have Reform. We have Advance. We have Homeland. Yeah, we have all of that. So the lesson to learn, not without wishing to sound dictatorial, is that if we think it's any better on the right than it is on the left, or if we think it's any better on the left than it is on the right, then no, this is factionalism. And as I've always said, politics is the human condition on steroids. That is exactly what it is, and that means that tribalism will only be accentuated, and you are going to get quite a lot of this. The interesting thing from an analyst's point of view is, where does it all lead us?
Well, if I come in on that, because I watch the right as well as the left, I've done plenty of coverage on Homeland from basically since when they collapsed. So obviously Steve Laws was one of their big contenders, and then he got kicked out for being too anti-Semitic, despite the fact that.
Peter, did they collapse because of Steve Laws, or did they collapse because?
There's a few.
Kenny
there's a few
appointed
reasons.
Somebody who was transgender to a position.
He wasn't transgender. He had a very recent history of being on Grindr, looking explicitly for people of an ethnic minority background to be with. Which, if you're part of Homeland, you're a big racist party. Frankly,
yeah.
It just didn't really make much sense. Plus, a load of people are these anti-degenerate lot that say, no. Homosexuals, trans people, etc.
You can't be gay, you can't be trans.
Yeah, not quite got the liberal disposition that we all have. So that annoyed a lot of people. Kenny made that decision anyway, the leader of Homeland, because God knows why. I don't really know why, to be honest, but he made the decision in spite of all his activists saying, no, what are you doing? His activists started trying to make a bit of a coup, but he runs that whole thing with an iron fist. So Thaz then left. Their conference collapsed not long after that. There were a few coups attempted as well, basically demanding, can the party be more racist, please? And also stop. Yeah, and also stop. Can you stop trying to get homosexuals on board so that you can get on the New Culture Forum with Peter Whittle?
Right.
Yeah. It's that factionalism is very much. Kenny basically started trying to remove the party toward a more sensible nationalism, that they keep calling it, which was effectively just reform policy, but they want to deport millions instead of hundreds of thousands. And they want
reform policy, deport all the brown people and wear a three-piece suit. I mean, that was their.
That's pretty much what they wanted. Yeah, but they kept moving. From what I can gather, Kenny kept moving it to more normal policy. I imagine because of whenever they went to the door, people would say, "This just sounds racist."
Yeah. If it smells like a duck, if it walks like a duck, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I've come up with the phrase of radical politics doesn't survive first contact with a normie. and this is why that happened. And then Steve Laws, Zuma History, and other online activists who are openly anti-Semitic, openly racist, they post things that it's no wonder that Steve Laws has been arrested, because we live in dystopian Britain. Yeah. They got fed up with that, and now Steve Laws has moved back to Patriotic Alternative, which was run by Mark Collette of BNP Extraction, who has that famous clip of him saying the book that every generation should read is Mein Kampf.
It's completely and utterly mad.
So yeah, I mean that's the thing with Homeland, and then obviously as you mentioned Advance, even Restore, even though it's not technically a political party. I mean, my outlook on it is they're trying their best to be part of the Tory party, but is the Tory party going to splinter too? I mean, this is it. There's factionalism everywhere, but ultimately, the mainstream there's only space for two parties, because they keep trying to talk about five-party politics, and I keep thinking maybe temporarily, but I don't think we're looking far enough into the future of who's going to be the future too. And it's basically going to be Reform. God knows who the other one's going to be. It could be Reform Tory, and that's actually the ideal situation, to be honest. But I don't know if the country's quite in that position.
Well, thus far we've not mentioned the Lib Dems. Well, not really.
They're the most likely one in my mind.
It's funny. It was Claire what's her face who was on hosting Have I Got News for You. Balding, yes, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Who was it was clearly a scripted line, but that doesn't matter. So they were talking about the Labour conference and the Tory conference, and then she just gives the line of, well, clearly for balance, we should mention the Lib Dem conference. Done that now.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they've got 70 odd MPs. Yeah, you can't completely ignore them.
They're third in some polls. Could be second in some soon enough. Budget time, they could be second consistently.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we talk about two-party politics, but what if we end up with is just as I think you were sort of foreshadowing before, is that we end up with Reform as a majority government and the Lib Dems as the official opposition, and both Labour and the Tories are reduced to double figures, and so we still have two-party politics. It's just not the same two usual parties.
You tell someone in, obviously it's completely hypothetical, but you tell someone in like 2019, oh yeah, in 10 years' time it's going to be this new party Reform versus the Lib Dems. It's like, who's Reform? Who's that?
Section. You get a section.
You've heard of Nigel Farage, who's just recently retired from politics.
That's what I always say to people, actually. I say, like, if I told you now, Nigel Farage is going to be leading Reform UK, and the main opposition, credibly, might either be the Tories or the Lib Dems, I would genuinely be put in a straitjacket. I'd be sent to the 25.
Yeah.
I would just say one thing, which I think is very interesting. No matter what happens, the dichotomy will be between party that wants to do less on the economy in terms of less intervention and party that wants more on the economy, more intervention. Now, that could end up being Reform, which some people may not agree with this, but I think this is true. Reform wants to do more in terms of economic intervention, but in certain places and in certain ways that are unorthodox. And people like the Lib Dems that will want to do less, but in practice, they'll be doing more of the same, in my opinion. And the current state of affairs means we don't know where this will end up. Because if you get Reform versus Tory, then the Tories will be the Libertarian Party, effectively. If it's Reform v Lib Dems, you have party that wants welfare chauvinism versus party that wants to have what I'm trying to grasp at is progressive welfare. I don't know.
I nearly called it international welfare, or
yeah, well, they want to give
communism.
£700 million to Africa or whatever.
Yeah, well, nobody knows what's in the Lib Dem what's in the Lib Dem manifesto, but it was a carbon copy of Labour's.
yesterday, I do mean literally yesterday. I was looking at their Wikipedia page for some sources, and I found out that several weeks ago they changed their colour scheme from yellow to orange, and now their official party colour scheme. No, party branding PDF says that all their activists have to use Democrat orange. a copyrighted color,
All right.
which is bright orange, by the way. So I didn't even know they changed color.
No, well, this is
How on earth am I meant to know what they stand for? I don't know.
Yeah, well, they sleptwalked really into almost being opposition.
Yeah.
And what they're riding on at the moment is, funnily enough, just basically being anti-Trump.
Yeah.
Trump came up quite a lot in his interviews. Ed Davies, I mean.
It's Trump and Farage, and that's
Yeah.
the weird thing is, I understand why he's doing what he's doing, Ed Davey, but if they had a leader who had a little bit more gumption when it comes to, if they had like a slightly less mental Zach Polanski, let's say,
He was a Lib Dem, by the way.
Yes, quite. He was Lib Dem. If they had their own kind of liberal populist, whatever on earth that means, if they had a Charles Kennedy or something, they'd be doing pretty well.
Well, if you want to go back far enough, William Gladstone. I'd kill for a prime minister like him again. To be fair.
Well, yeah, me too. That's where you and I eventually converged. Somewhere at the end of the 19th century.
Oh yeah.
But if you had somebody that had a little bit more, oomph and gumption, I think they'd be doing a lot better.
Yeah, but they're just coasting along on being a regional party that was effectively. It used to just be, we're for remaining in the EU. Sorry, rejoining the EU now. Brexit's kind of not really talked about anymore. Yes, the big L for them. But Brexit's not talked about anymore, so now it's just, we're going to generally be against nationalism, whether it's here or America, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Because
unless it's Cornwall, or Scotland, or Wales.
Yeah, because they don't talk about the nationalism in Europe, do they? But anyway.
Yeah. I'm going to leap in
here. Yes, Patrick.
One of the biggest mistakes that you don't realise until you've already gone too far down this path, down the garden path, is in political strategy is allowing yourself and your own strategy to be defined by your opponents. So if you are against somebody or something or some principle or some notion, you are defined by what you are against. But what that means is whenever they change, you change with them, because you're now opposing whatever it is that they're standing for, which effectively means that they dictate your political strategy. Okay? And this is one of the problems. It means that although you might appear to be like a protest movement or that sort of, this is, there are other movements out there on both right and the left who have allowed their strategy to be defined by their opponents, and it never ends well. Because ultimately, what you do is determined by what they do. Now, nobody with any experience in leadership is going to say that that is a very good way of running any kind of organization or campaign or anything or party or anything like that. So what you have with the Lib Dems now is sort of basically we're against all of that stuff. Okay, well, you're against that, but that's defined, but that, quote unquote, is defined by them. It's not defined by you, which means that your strategy, whatever it might happen to be, is one that's effectively led by your opponents. And however you think you're going to be making a success of that, I've got no idea. Now, with that said, when we compare it to what we've been talking about before, Conservative Party conference, well, at least there are some unique positions, and we can even talk about Labour conference, well, at least they have got some unique positions. They've got their own ideology, and it isn't being led by their primary opponents. So, like I said, we're now, as to reform, where they come in, I mean, at the moment, they appear to be positioning themselves primarily as being further to the right of the Tories. But again, then, you're being led by what the Tories' political strategy is. Effectively, you are. And, and I think Kemi and her team knows that, and therefore, some people think she's being manipulated, nudged by reform. Whereas actually, if she positions herself in the way that she has done today at conference, she's doing the same thing back. Basically, she's prompting them to say, okay, if we go with you on, things like the ECHR, these sort of fields, what are you going to do next?
Well, I mean, on that point, I did catch the Yusuf with Marc Francois on Doobs and Co. over on GB News, so I suppose you can see what the initial reaction to that is. And effectively, Zia Yusuf's done his classic of, well, who cares what the Tories have to say, really? Which could trickle down the reform hierarchy, I suppose. But it's definitely a thing to look out for, I'd say, because to some extent you have to react to your opponents in politics. But as you say, it's at what point are you being led around by the nose by them? With the Lib Dems, obviously, Trump and Farage, it's pretty much entirely Labour. It not to the same extent, but certainly they are. But to give credit to the Tories, they did not let themselves be led around by the nose by reform. I will give them that. But having said that, the problem then you have is, well, who actually cares? Like, how many votes is that going to turn into? Answer: probably not many, but we'll have to wait and see. I could be easily wrong on that.
Yeah, it's one of those where it depends to a quite significant extent. It depends on how effective your activists are on the doorstep, and people really do underestimate this. You can put all manner of things in manifestos, and you can have national sort of politics going on in terms of this sort of strategy of who's leading who around. But the reality is what matters in the conversations on the doorstep, and it matters in terms of who's interviewing, who is leafleting whom, who is doing the door knocking. Are they able to actually sell your political vision? Because however good it is, what's going to matter on the doorstep or in telephone banking, that's worth mentioning as well. I've done that. It matters how effective the people are who you have in selling your message, because it can be the most amazing message since Christ came to earth, but you're not going to, well, whatever, but you're not going to get anywhere unless you've got people who can sell you. When you're the leader, the idea that a lot of people have is that you are there to sell the party. Well, you are, but only to a certain political class.
Yeah.
But to ordinary people, you need other ordinary people on the doorstep. And this is the question. Do the Lib Dems have that? Do Reform have that? The Tories and Labour, they've got them. They've got them. It's a case of mobilising that operation. But
I think, I know what you mean. I mean, I know the Tories, I think, are probably in a bit of trouble when it comes to their boots on the ground activist types. In my head, that I was thinking, well, what's the test for seeing if, at least for me, the Tories have been successful? And it's like, well, if in a week I've forgotten Kemi Badenoch's the leader of the Tories again, I kind of guess that's my answer, because a lot of my Tory friends think I lie about this. I don't. I actually forget she's leader of the Tory party probably every other week. But that might change now that she's allowed to be a bit more outspoken at this conference. But then it's a case of, well, she needs to stay there, really. I mean,
it's their first conference leader.
Yeah, and she,
I think
6 out of 10.
Yeah, what's interesting is that actually that seems to be, you've just said 6 out of 10. That seems to be pretty much the average among even the mainstream media, and including the people you wouldn't really have thought would be very supportive of her at all.
Yeah.
It seems to be the impression that I guess the short sentence is that could have been an awful lot worse.
Well, which I guess on the face of it is a success, but it's an awful lot worse still means it was quite bad in my mind, and it's.
Well, you're quite right, because what's revealing there is the standards by which it's being measured.
Yeah, I mean, well done. You're now nobody's saying you're being the next prime minister apart from Tory hardcores, who are lying to themselves. Frankly, people think you have until May to prove yourself. At least that's gone beyond November, which was the last estimate. Unless the possibility of this is people hiding their intentions and having a surprise bloodless coup that they want. But at that point, everyone's worried about regicide. Are they just going to get rid of Jenrick after half a year?
Well, the Tories are certainly well known for that.
Yeah.
It's well known for that. I mean, Labour is very different. You have to jump through far more hoops to get rid of the Labour leader.
Yeah. Well, I mean, talking of that as well, I did see on Twitter anyway. There were a few drips of people leaving Number 10 again. They were just leaving their positions. I don't know what the feeling's like in Number 10, but it can't be good. I think people are bracing for a pretty dreadful budget. I know I am.
Yes, yeah. and that will be. I think quite possibly this will be determinative for this Labour government. Will be determinative for where they end up and how quickly. And another thing, of course, then how quickly an election is called.
Oh God!
if this government collapses, which it could, then we will end up in a situation where we don't have. We have this total vacuum of power, and we don't really have anyone to fill it. So,
which could end up being the best run Britain in about 20 years.
I mean, you say that, but that means it's run by the civil service. Except sugar, it is already.
Well, yeah, quite. Yeah.
So you kind of sometimes when things change, you have to wonder how much has actually not changed versus what has.
Well, it's the famous David Starkey line, isn't it? Every revolution just keeps the worst part of the last regime. So I could imagine that happens again, but we'll have to see on that one. But no, it's I mean at this point as well, conference season is over, and realistically, I think the only people who've really come out a lot better coming out than going in would probably be the Tories. Reform went in happy, came out happy. Labour again went in pretending everything was okay. Everyone in the background, everyone off the record saying, "Yeah, we're probably going to have knives out for Starmer at some point," and then everyone went out pretending nothing was wrong. And Lib Dems, well, they just hate Trump and Farage still. So kind of a not much happened apart from today in terms of this conference season, which is
nothing ever happens, mate. Nothing ever happens.
Well, that's the funny thing, isn't it? November, a big thing will happen, the budget, and big things could happen. But in hindsight, it turns out actually quite a lot happened. It's
well, there we are.
Yeah.
So perhaps that's where we should leave it. Yeah. That we
yeah.
Have, I think we've talked all the way through the conference season. A lot happened, a lot didn't happen, and a lot happened that didn't happen. If you see what I mean. And probably, with that said, a lot didn't happen that did. If that makes any sense. So there we are.
That was a whole load of waffle, but I kind of get what you mean, I guess.
I'm a political journalist. I get paid to waffle. That's kind of the point.
Yes, quite. Well, with that waffle, yes, I think we will end it there. So thank you. Thank you to Simon and Patrick, and of course from myself for watching. With that, that's everything we had for you for today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.